Listen guys, before the video starts, hit that subscribe button because today's story is going to keep you hooked till the very end. Smash that like button right now because this story is going to completely change how you think about judging people. So friends, I'm Clint Eastwood, and I'm going to tell you a story that happened to me pretty recently. This is a story about how I was turned away from my own hospital. Yeah, you heard that right. My own hospital. And from this, I learned that you should never, ever judge anyone by their appearance, their clothes, or their circumstances. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today. You know what? In all my years, and trust me, there have been many of them. I'm 94 years old now. I've learned that life has a really twisted, ironic sense of humor. It throws curveballs at you when you least expect them. It teaches you lessons in the most bizarre, unexpected places, and it reminds you of who you really are exactly when you've completely forgotten. Today, I want to share with you something that happened to me not too long ago. Something that taught me a deep, profound lesson about making assumptions, about respect, about dignity, and about the dangerous, destructive game of judging people just by how they look on the outside. It was a Thursday afternoon. I remember because Thursdays have always felt like that awkward, forgotten day of the week. You know what I mean? It's not quite hump day anymore, but it's not close enough to Friday to feel any excitement. It's just Thursday, existing in that strange middle space. Anyway, I had just wrapped up a film production meeting in Los Angeles. One of those exhausting, draining meetings where everyone debates camera angles and lighting setups for 4 solid hours when they could have just made a decision and moved on with their lives. Hit that like button if you've ever been stuck in an endless, pointless meeting where nothing gets accomplished. I was driving back home in my old pickup truck. Yeah, I still drive myself most places. I'm not one of those Hollywood types who needs a driver everywhere. When suddenly I felt this sharp, stabbing pain in my chest. At first, I thought maybe it was just heartburn or indigestion from the terrible catered lunch we'd had at the meeting. You know, one of those sad, depressing sandwiches that taste like cardboard wrapped in more cardboard. But the pain kept getting worse. Sharper. More intense. More frightening, if I'm being honest. It started radiating down my left arm, and I've lived long enough to know that's not a good sign. That's not something you ignore or brush off. Comment below if you've ever had a health scare that genuinely frightened you. I pulled over immediately into a gas station parking lot and called my personal assistant, Marcus. Marcus, I said, trying to keep my voice calm and steady even though my heart was racing and my hands were shaking. I need you to meet me at Riverside Memorial Hospital. I'm having chest pains. Serious ones. Marcus, being the efficient, reliable person he is, immediately went into crisis mode. Mr. Eastwood, I'll meet you there in 15 minutes. Should I call ahead? Should I alert the medical staff that you're coming? Should I call an ambulance? No, I said, probably making my first big mistake of the day. Just meet me there. I'll drive myself. It's only 10 minutes away. I'll be fine. Now, here's something interesting, something deeply ironic that makes this whole crazy story even more unbelievable. Riverside Memorial Hospital wasn't just any random hospital I picked off a map. It was part of a large medical complex that my investment group had acquired approximately 18 months earlier. We'd bought out a struggling, bankrupt healthcare system, poured in about $200 million in renovations and upgrades, hired top medical staff from across the country, and turned it into one of the premier, most advanced medical facilities in Southern California. But here's the thing. I had never actually been to this particular hospital location as a patient. Never walked through those doors needing help. I'd been there for board meetings, sure. I'd walked through during construction inspections, wearing a hard hat and looking at blueprints. I'd seen architectural plans and reviewed financial reports in air-conditioned conference rooms. But I'd never walked through those emergency room doors as someone who needed help, as someone who was vulnerable, as someone who was scared and in pain. Share this video right now because what happens next is absolutely insane and unbelievable. I arrived at the emergency entrance and parked my truck in the first available spot I could find. I was wearing what I always wear when I'm working on production sets or just living my normal life. Old, faded blue jeans with a few paint stains on them from when I'd been working on some set designs the week before. A simple gray t-shirt that had definitely seen better days, and a worn-out denim jacket that I've probably owned for 25 years at least. It's comfortable. It's broken in. It's me. I wasn't trying to impress anyone or make any kind of statement about who I was. I wasn't trying to hide my identity, either. I was just being myself, which is the only way I know how to be after all these years. I grabbed my wallet and my phone and walked toward the emergency department entrance. The automatic glass door slid open with that familiar whooshing sound, and I stepped into the bright, sterile, antiseptic-smelling environment of the ER waiting room. There were maybe a dozen people sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs, waiting to be seen. Some looked bored, staring at their phones. Some looked anxious, fidgeting nervously. Some looked like they were in genuine pain. Behind the reception desk sat a young woman, probably in her mid-20s, with perfectly styled auburn hair and makeup that looked like it had taken an hour to apply perfectly. Her name tag read, Brittany Chapman, Patient Registration Specialist. She was typing something on her computer, completely absorbed in whatever was on her screen, and didn't even look up or acknowledge my presence when I approached the desk and stood there waiting. I stood there for a moment, waiting patiently. The pain in my chest was still there, throbbing, pulsing, making me increasingly nervous with each passing second. Finally, after what felt like forever, but was probably only 30 or 40 seconds, I said, "Excuse me, I need help. I'm having chest pains." Hit that subscribe button if you can't believe what you're hearing. Brittany glanced up at me briefly, and I saw it immediately. That look, that split-second assessment where someone sizes you up and makes a snap judgment about who you are. Her eyes traveled from my face down to my clothes, my old jeans, my faded t-shirt, my worn jacket, and then back up to my face. And in that brief moment, I could see her mentally categorizing me, putting me into a box, making assumptions about who I was, what I was worth, and what I could afford. I've been in this business long enough to recognize that look. I've seen it before. Chest pains, she repeated, her voice flat and completely uninterested. She didn't sound concerned. She didn't sound compassionate or caring. She sounded annoyed, bothered, like I was interrupting something far more important than my medical emergency. "Okay, do you have insurance?" "Yes, I have insurance," I said, putting my hand on my chest where the pain was radiating and spreading. "But I really think I need to see a doctor soon. This pain is getting worse by the minute." "Sir, I need to get your information first before anyone can see you," Brittany said, pulling out a clipboard with forms attached to it. "That's our policy. Hospital policy. Now, what insurance company are you with? And I'll need to see your insurance card and a photo ID." I reached for my wallet, but as I did, the pain suddenly intensified dramatically. It felt like someone was squeezing my heart with a giant fist. I winced and grabbed the edge of the counter to steady myself and keep from falling. "Look," I said, breathing heavily, struggling to get the words out. "I think this might be serious. Can I please see a doctor first and do all the paperwork after? Please. Drop a like if you think the situation is getting dangerous and concerning." Brittany's expression didn't change even slightly. No concern, no empathy, no human compassion whatsoever. Nothing. "Sir, everyone who comes in here thinks their situation is serious and urgent. That's why it's called an emergency room. Everyone thinks they're dying. But we have procedures and protocols we need to follow. Rules are rules. If you can't provide insurance information right now, I can direct you to County General Hospital about 12 miles from here. They have a charity care program for uninsured patients or people who can't afford proper treatment." Charity care program. Uninsured patients. People who can't afford treatment. She had looked at me for maybe 5 seconds total and had already decided I was poor, that I couldn't pay, That I didn't belong in this fancy hospital. Her hospital. My hospital, actually. But she didn't know that yet. I have insurance, I repeated, trying desperately to keep my voice calm and controlled even though frustration and fear were building inside me like a pressure cooker. I can pay for treatment. I can afford whatever this costs. I just need medical attention. Right now. Please. Sir, there's no need to get aggressive and hostile with me, Brittany said, her voice taking on a sharp, defensive, accusatory edge. I'm just doing my job, following the rules. If you can't cooperate with our registration process, I'm going to have to ask you to leave this facility and seek treatment elsewhere. We don't tolerate aggressive behavior here. Comment unbelievable if you're shocked by how she's treating someone in medical distress. At that exact moment, a man in a white coat appeared from a doorway behind the registration desk. He was middle-aged, probably early 50s, with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look academic. His name tag identified him as Dr. Stephen Morrison, our director. He must have overheard the tense exchange because he walked over with a concerned, curious expression on his face. "Is everything all right here, Brittany?" he asked, glancing between her and me with obvious suspicion. "This gentleman is refusing to provide insurance information," Brittany said, and I noticed how she emphasized the word gentleman in a sarcastic way that suggested she didn't really think I was much of a gentleman at all. "And he's getting verbally aggressive and threatening when I explain our standard registration policies to him." "I'm not being aggressive or threatening," I said firmly, looking directly at Dr. Morrison and hoping he'd be more reasonable. "I'm having severe chest pains. The pain is radiating down my left arm. I need medical attention. I'm happy to provide any information you need, but I'm genuinely concerned this might be a cardiac event, and time might be absolutely critical here." Dr. Morrison studied me for a long moment. Unlike Brittany, he actually seemed to be assessing me medically rather than financially, which I appreciated. "How long have you been experiencing the pain?" he asked. "About 45 minutes now," I said. "It started while I was driving. It's getting progressively worse with each passing minute." "And you drove yourself here?" Dr. Morrison asked, his eyebrows raising in what looked like disbelief or skepticism. "You didn't call an ambulance? You drove yourself while having chest pain?" "The hospital was only 10 minutes away," I explained. "It seemed faster and more practical to just drive myself rather than wait for an ambulance." Dr. Morrison nodded slowly, but I could see growing skepticism in his eyes. He was doubting my story already. "Mr. Eastwood," I said clearly. "Clint Eastwood. Share this with someone who's ever been judged unfairly by their appearance." The moment those words left my mouth, I saw Brittany's face change dramatically. But it wasn't recognition. It wasn't realization or understanding. It was mockery. Pure mockery. She actually smirked, actually smiled, and almost laughed like I had just said the most ridiculous, absurd thing she'd ever heard in her entire life. "Clint Eastwood," she repeated slowly, looking at Dr. Morrison with an expression that clearly said, "Can you believe this crazy guy?" "Right. Sure you are. And I'm Meryl Streep. Nice to meet you, Mr. Eastwood." She actually did a little mock bow. Dr. Morrison didn't smile or laugh, but I could see doubt and suspicion growing in his eyes too. "Sir," he said carefully, using that patronizing tone people use when they think they're dealing with someone who's mentally unstable. "I understand you're in pain, and we're absolutely going to help you. But I need you to provide us with accurate, truthful information. What is your actual real name?" "My actual, real name is Clint Eastwood," I said again, more firmly this time, trying to make them understand. "And if you check your hospital records, if you look at the ownership structure of this facility, you'll see that my investment company, Malpaso Productions, is the majority stakeholder in this entire medical complex. I literally own this hospital. Hit that like button if you think they're making a catastrophic, career-ending mistake." That did it. That statement pushed them from skeptical to actually hostile and angry. Brittany laughed out loud, an actual, loud laugh that echoed through the waiting room, causing several patients sitting in the chairs to look up and stare at us. "Oh my God," she said, shaking her head like she'd just heard the funniest joke ever told. "We get some crazy, delusional people in here, Dr. Morrison, but this is absolutely next level. This is incredible. He actually thinks he's Clint Eastwood, and he thinks he owns the hospital. This is amazing." Dr. Morrison's expression hardened significantly. His jaw clenched. "Sir, if you're experiencing a genuine medical emergency, we absolutely will treat you. That's our job. But if this is some kind of mental health crisis, or if you're under the influence of drugs or alcohol, we need to know that information immediately. It fundamentally affects how we diagnose and treat you." "I am not on drugs," I said, my voice rising despite my absolute best efforts to stay calm and controlled. "I am not drunk. I haven't had a drop of alcohol. I am not having a mental health crisis or a psychotic break. I am having chest pain, real physical chest pain, and I am telling you the absolute truth about who I am. My name is Clint Eastwood. I am an actor, director, and producer. I've been making films for over 60 years. And yes, I am part of the ownership group of this hospital. Now, are you going to provide medical care, or do I need to get back in my truck and drive to another facility?" "Sir, let me be very clear with you," Dr. Morrison said, and his voice had gone cold now, clinical and detached and dismissive. "First of all, Clint Eastwood is a very famous person, one of the most recognizable, iconic actors and directors in Hollywood history, in American history. I grew up watching his movies, Dirty Harry, Unforgiven, $1 Million Baby. And you, sir, look absolutely nothing like him. Nothing at all. Not even close. Comment below if you would have stayed calm in this impossible situation." "I'm 94 years old," I said, feeling the pain in my chest intensifying with my stress and frustration. "I probably don't look exactly like I did in the movies from 40 or 50 years ago. People age. That's how time works." Clint Eastwood wouldn't show up alone to an emergency room, wearing old jeans and a ratty, worn-out jacket, Brittany added, clearly feeling emboldened and empowered by Dr. Morrison's skepticism and hostility. "He would have bodyguards, personal assistants, a whole entourage of people. He would arrive in a limousine or a private ambulance. He would be taken directly to a private VIP medical suite with private nurses, not standing at a public registration desk arguing with us like some homeless person. Use some common sense. Think about it logically." That comment, that statement about how someone successful and famous should look and behave, stung more than I want to admit. Not because I cared what they thought about my clothes. I genuinely, honestly didn't care about that at all. But because of what it revealed about their assumptions, about their prejudices, about their narrow, limited, stereotypical view of how wealth and success and fame should present itself. "How I dress is my personal choice and my business," I said quietly, dangerously quietly. "How I choose to travel and live my life is my decision to make. I'm a private person who doesn't need or want an entourage following me everywhere I go. I value my privacy and my independence. And the fact that I don't fit your narrow mental image, your Hollywood stereotype of what a successful person should look like, doesn't make me a liar or a fraud." Share this video because the lesson here is so critically important. "Look, buddy," Dr. Morrison said, and his tone had shifted completely from skeptical to outright dismissive and contemptuous. "I'm going to be brutally honest with you here. This hospital serves a very affluent, wealthy community. We get people coming in here all the time trying to scam us, trying to game the system, trying to get free, expensive treatment by pretending to be someone they're not. Some guy came in last month claiming to be a tech billionaire from Silicon Valley. Turned out he was homeless and hadn't bathed in 3 weeks. So, forgive us if we're a little cautious, a little skeptical when someone walks in dressed like a ranch hand or a day laborer and claims to be a Hollywood legend and hospital owner." Dressed like a ranch hand, day laborer, claims to be a Hollywood legend. Each word was another judgment, another assumption, another insult, another brick in the wall they were building between themselves and the truth that was standing right in front of them. "Here's what we're going to do," Dr. Morrison continued, crossing his arms across his chest. We'll have someone perform a very basic assessment to make sure you're not in immediate life-threatening danger. But you're going to have to wait your turn like everyone else in that waiting room. And you're going to have to provide real identification and real, verifiable insurance information. No more games. No more fantasies. No more claiming to be someone you're not. Understood? Are we clear? Drop a like if you can't believe this is actually happening. At that precise moment, the automatic doors behind me whooshed open and Marcus, my assistant, came rushing and looking panicked. Marcus is in his early 30s, always impeccably dressed in expensive suits, always professional and put together. Today he was wearing a tailored navy blue suit that probably cost $3,000, carrying his leather portfolio and his phone, looking every inch the successful executive. "Mr. Eastwood," Marcus called out, hurrying over to me with genuine fear and concern written all over his face. "Are you okay? Are you all right? I got here as fast as I could. Have they taken you back for treatment yet? Have you been seen by a cardiologist? Why are you still standing out here?" Brittany and Dr. Morrison both turned to look at Marcus with confused expressions, clearly thrown off by his expensive appearance and obvious concern for me. "This gentleman is with you?" Dr. Morrison asked Marcus suspiciously, his tone dripping with doubt. "Gentlemen." Marcus looked confused for a second, then looked at me standing there in pain, then back at Dr. Morrison with growing anger. "This is Clint Eastwood, my employer, the man I work for. Why hasn't he been taken back for treatment yet? He called me over 45 minutes ago reporting severe chest pain. Where's the cardiology team? Why isn't he hooked up to an EKG machine? Why isn't anyone helping him?" Comment shocked, if you think they're about to realize their massive mistake. Brittany's face had gone from mocking and confident to uncertain and worried. Her smile disappeared. He told us he was Clint Eastwood, but we thought. I mean, he doesn't look his clothes." "Doesn't look like what?" Marcus asked, his voice sharp and angry now, more angry than I'd ever heard him. "Doesn't look like you think a successful, famous person should look? Doesn't fit your narrow, prejudiced, stereotypical idea of how wealth and fame should present itself? So you just assumed he was lying? You assumed he was crazy or a fraud?" "Sir, we deal with fraud attempts all the time," Dr. Morrison tried to explain, but his voice had lost all its confidence and authority. He sounded defensive now, worried. People claiming to be someone they're not, trying to get free treatment. "So your solution, your professional medical decision, is to deny potentially life-saving cardiac treatment to someone having classic heart attack symptoms because you don't like how he's dressed?" Marcus was furious now, absolutely livid. His face was red. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any comprehension whatsoever of the liability you've just exposed this hospital to? Not to mention the complete moral failure of turning away someone in obvious medical distress? This is unconscionable." Marcus pulled out his phone and started dialing rapidly. "I'm calling hospital administration right now. I'm calling our legal team. I'm calling the board of directors. And I'm calling the press. This is unconscionable. This is malpractice. This is discrimination. This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Hit subscribe because what happens next will blow your mind." Wait, Dr. Morrison said, holding up his hands in a defensive gesture. His face had gone pale ashen. "Let's not be hasty here. Let's think about this. If there's been a misunderstanding, if there's been a communication breakdown." "A misunderstanding?" Marcus repeated, his voice rising to almost a shout. "A man tells you he's having potentially life-threatening chest pain, tells you exactly who he is, and you mock him? You laugh at him? You threaten to throw him out onto the street? That's not a misunderstanding. That's not a communication breakdown. That's negligence. That's malpractice. That's discrimination based on appearance." At that moment, another person came rushing through a different doorway like they'd been shot out of a cannon. This was a woman in her 60s, wearing professional business attire, an expensive-looking suit, and she looked absolutely alarmed and panicked. Her name tag identified her as Margaret Sullivan, hospital administrator. "What's going on here?" she demanded, looking around at all of us with wide eyes. "I got an emergency alert from security about a major disturbance in the ER. What's happening?" "Margaret," Marcus said, turning to face her directly. "Thank God you're here. Do you know who I am?" Margaret studied Marcus carefully for a moment, and then her eyes went wide with recognition. "You're Marcus Chun, Mr. Eastwood's executive assistant. You've been at our board meetings. I've seen you in the conference room. Oh my God." She looked at me then, really looked at me closely for the first time, studied my face, and the color drained from her face completely. She went white as a sheet. "Oh no. Oh no, no, no. Mr. Eastwood. Sir. What happened here? What's going on?" Share this video to show people how dangerous assumptions can be. "What happened?" Marcus said before I could answer, his voice cold and controlled now. "Is that Mr. Eastwood came to this emergency room almost 50 minutes ago with severe chest pain and classic cardiac symptoms. And instead of providing immediate, emergency medical care as required by law, your staff accused him of fraud, mocked him for his appearance and his clothing, laughed at him, and threatened to throw him out of the hospital he owns, the hospital he invested $200 million into." Margaret looked like she might actually faint right there. She grabbed the edge of the counter to steady herself. She turned to Dr. Morrison and Brittany, and her expression was one of absolute horror, shock, and fury. "Please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't turn away a patient presenting with cardiac symptoms. Please tell me this is some kind of horrible mistake or misunderstanding." "We didn't turn him away," Dr. Morrison said quickly, desperately, his words tumbling out. "We were going to do a basic assessment. We were going to help him. We just wanted proper identification first. We just wanted to verify his insurance. It's standard procedure. It's policy. Standard procedure is to provide emergency medical care first and worry about paperwork and billing second." Margaret practically shouted, her voice echoing through the ER. "That's the law. That's medical ethics. And even if you didn't recognize Mr. Eastwood, even if you had legitimate doubts about his identity, you don't mock a patient. You don't judge someone by their clothing or their appearance. You treat every single person who walks through those doors with dignity and respect and compassion. Every single person." But wait, here's where the story takes an even crazier twist, and this is the part that really taught me something profound about human nature. Drop a comment if you're ready for the next twist in this story. Margaret turned to me, and there were actually tears forming in her eyes. Real tears. "Mr. Eastwood, I am so profoundly, deeply sorry. This is inexcusable. Unforgivable. Please let us get you immediate care right now. We have a cardiology team on standby. Let me personally escort you to our cardiac care unit." But just as she said that, another man came rushing into the ER. He was younger, maybe late 30s, wearing surgical scrubs, and he looked frantic, out of breath like he'd been running. "Is there a Clint Eastwood here?" he called out, looking around desperately. "I got an emergency page about Clint Eastwood." "I'm Clint Eastwood," I said, raising my hand. This doctor rushed over, and his face was filled with genuine concern. "Mr. Eastwood, I'm Dr. James Patterson, head of cardiology. I'm so sorry for any delay. Let's get you back immediately. I need to get you on an EKG right now, start in 4, run some blood work. Can you walk, or do you need a wheelchair?" "I can walk," I said, as Dr. Patterson started to lead me toward the treatment area. Brittany suddenly spoke up. Her voice was shaking. "Wait, you really are Clint Eastwood? You were telling the truth. Oh my God, I thought you were just some homeless person trying to scam us. I thought." Hit that subscribe button, because what I say next is the most important part of this entire story. I stopped and turned to look at her. Really look at her. She was young. Probably had student loans. Probably worked hard to get this job. Probably wasn't a bad person deep down. Just someone who'd made a terrible, Terrible judgment call based on my appearance. That's exactly the problem, I said quietly, and everyone in that waiting room could hear me. You didn't think I was Clint Eastwood trying to scam you. You thought I was just some homeless person. And because you thought I was poor, because you thought I was nobody important, you treated me with contempt. You mocked me. You laughed at me. You threatened to throw me out. Brittany's face crumpled. Tears started running down her cheeks, ruining her perfect makeup. But here's what you need to understand, I continued, looking not just at her, but at Dr. Morrison, at Margaret, at everyone gathered around. The way you treated me was wrong. Absolutely wrong. But not because I turned out to be someone famous or wealthy or important. It was wrong because that's no way to treat any human being. If I really had been homeless, if I really had been poor, if I really had been nobody important, I still would have deserved basic human dignity. I still would have deserved respect. I still would have deserved medical care. Comment respect if this message resonates with you. Dr. Patterson took me back to a treatment room, and thankfully, after thorough examination, it turned out I wasn't having a heart attack. It was severe angina caused by stress and some arterial blockage that would need to be addressed, but I wasn't in immediate danger of dying. They kept me for observation, ran tests, adjusted my medications. But here's where the story gets even more interesting, and this is where I learned the most important lessons. About 3 hours later, after I was stable and resting in a private room, Margaret came to see me. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in those few hours. "Mr. Eastwood," she said, "I've conducted a preliminary investigation into what happened. I've reviewed security footage. I've interviewed witnesses. And I need to tell you what I've decided to do about Dr. Morrison and Brittany." "I'm listening," I said. "I'm recommending immediate termination for both of them," Margaret said firmly. "What they did was unconscionable. It violated every policy we have. It exposed the hospital to enormous liability. They need to be fired. Immediately." I thought about that for a long moment. I really did. These two people had treated me terribly. They'd judged me. They'd mocked me. They'd potentially put my life at risk by delaying treatment. But I also thought about who I was at 25, the mistakes I'd made, the poor judgments I'd shown, the second chances people had given me that changed my life. Share this video because what I decided to do next might surprise you. "I don't want them fired," I finally said. Margaret looked shocked. "Mr. Eastwood, I know what they did," I interrupted. "Believe me, I know. But I don't think they're bad people. I think they're people who made a very bad decision based on prejudices they probably didn't even know they had. And firing them won't teach them anything except to be afraid. It won't change how they see the world." "Then what do you suggest?" Margaret asked. "Suspension without pay for 2 weeks," I said. "Mandatory training on implicit bias, on dignity in patient care, on examining our own prejudices and assumptions. Written warnings in their permanent files. And 6 months probation. One more incident of any kind, anything even remotely similar, and they're gone. No second chances after that." Margaret nodded slowly. "That's more than generous, Mr. Eastwood. More than they deserve." "Maybe," I said. "But here's the other part. I want them to spend those 2 weeks volunteering at a homeless shelter or a free clinic. Somewhere they'll interact with people who actually are poor, who actually are struggling, who actually are the people they thought I was. I want them to see the humanity in those faces, to hear those stories, to understand that every person has value and dignity regardless of their bank account or their address or how they're dressed." Hit that like button if you think this was the right decision. Margaret agreed to my terms. She left to inform Dr. Morrison and Brittany of their punishment and their opportunity to learn and grow from this experience. But the story doesn't end there. There's one more twist, one more lesson that I learned that made this whole terrible experience worthwhile. About 2 weeks later, I received 2 letters at my office. Personal letters. Handwritten. One from Brittany, one from Dr. Morrison. Brittany's letter was 4 pages long, written on simple notebook paper with handwriting that looked like she'd been crying while she wrote it. She apologized extensively for everything that had happened. But more than that, she told me about her 2 weeks volunteering at a homeless shelter downtown. She wrote about a man named Robert she'd met there, a military veteran with PTSD who'd lost everything. She wrote about how Robert had been a successful engineer before his mental health struggles, how he'd had a family, a home, a life, how he'd told her about the dozens of times people had looked right through him like he was invisible, like he wasn't even human, just because he was homeless. She wrote, "Mr. Eastwood, when Robert told me his stories, all I could think about was how I treated you that day. And I realized something that makes me feel sick to my stomach. I didn't just judge you incorrectly. I judged you at all. I made a human being's worth dependent on their appearance, their clothes, their perceived wealth. And that's not just wrong when the person turns out to be famous. That's wrong, period. Always wrong. Thank you for giving me a chance to learn this lesson, instead of just losing my job and learning nothing." Comment amen if this story is touching your heart. Dr. Morrison's letter was shorter, but equally powerful. He wrote about volunteering at a free medical clinic in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Los Angeles, about treating patients who'd been turned away from other hospitals because they couldn't pay, about a young mother with untreated diabetes, an elderly man with a heart condition who'd been ignoring symptoms for months because he was afraid of the bills, a teenager with a broken arm who'd waited 3 days before seeking treatment. He wrote, "I became a doctor to help people. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I started seeing patients as potential problems, as liability risks, as billing opportunities, instead of as human beings who needed help. You reminded me why I went to medical school in the first place. Not to protect a hospital's bottom line, but to heal people. All people. Every person who walks through those doors deserves my best care, regardless of who they are or what they can pay." I wrote them both back. Short notes. I told them I accepted their apologies. I told them I hope they take these lessons and use them to become better at their jobs and better in their lives. I told them to let this be a turning point, not an ending. Here's what I learned from this whole experience. Or maybe what I was reminded of, because deep down I think I knew it already but had forgotten. Share this video with everyone you know, because this message could change lives. We live in a world that's increasingly divided into categories: rich and poor, famous and unknown, worthy and unworthy, important and unimportant, successful and failed. We make these determinations, these judgments in literal seconds based on superficial characteristics: clothes, accent, posture, confidence level, appearance, the car someone drives, the neighborhood they live in. And then we treat people accordingly, completely differently based on which category we've mentally assigned them to. We give respect freely to those we think deserve it based on external markers of success, and we withhold it completely from those we think don't deserve it. But that's completely backwards. That's absolutely the wrong way to think about human worth and human dignity. Respect isn't something that should have to be earned through wealth or fame or appearance or status or achievements. Basic human respect, the kind that says, "I see you as a fellow human being who is worthy of dignity and consideration and compassion." That should be the default setting. That should be the automatic starting point for every single interaction we have with another person, not something people have to prove they deserve. Hit that like button if you agree with this message. Everything that happened in that hospital that day happened because 2 people forgot that fundamental truth. They saw someone who didn't fit their mental expectations, their preconceived notions about how success and wealth should look, and they automatically assumed he was less than. They assumed he was a problem to be managed, an obstacle to be removed, a potential fraud to be prevented rather than a person in need to be helped and treated with dignity. And here's the really uncomfortable part that I had to face myself during those hours in that hospital room, thinking about what had happened. I've done the same thing. Maybe not in that specific situation, maybe not to that extreme degree, but I have made snap judgments about people based on appearances. I have treated people differently based on how they looked or how they talked, or how they carried themselves, or what they wore. I've assumed I knew someone's entire story, their whole life, before I'd taken the time to actually find out, before I'd asked even a single question. I've been guilty of the same kind of prejudice and assumption. We all have. Every single one of us. Comment below if you've ever made this mistake too. Be honest. It's human nature. It's pattern recognition. It's survival instinct. Our brains are literally wired to make quick judgments, to categorize people, to keep us safe. But that doesn't make it right. And when you're in a position of authority, when you're wearing a uniform or representing a company or holding any kind of power over someone else's experience, you have an even bigger, greater responsibility to rise above those natural instincts. You have to verify before you judge. You have to ask questions before you make assumptions. You have to see the human being first, before you see anything else. This experience reminded me, forced me to slow down in my interactions with people, to ask more questions before making assumptions, to remember that the universe has a really ironic sense of humor about these things. And sometimes, often actually, the person you're casually dismissing or judging or looking down on is exactly the person you should be listening to most carefully. The person who has something important to teach you. The person who can change your perspective if you'll just give them a chance. I think about Brittany and Dr. Morrison sometimes, even now, several months later. I wonder if they kept their jobs long-term, if they really learned the lessons they said they learned in those heartfelt, emotional letters, if they treat people differently now, with more respect and dignity and compassion. I genuinely hope so. I really do. I hope that one uncomfortable, embarrassing, career-threatening encounter became a genuine turning point for them, the way it became an important reminder for me. Because at the end of the day, that's what matters most. Not whether we make mistakes, we all do, constantly, but whether we learn and grow from those mistakes or just keep repeating them over and over. Share this video because this lesson could save someone's life someday. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people. Just human beings trying to make our way through this complicated, confusing life. Some of us have more money than others. Some have more fame, more power, more status, more advantages, more opportunities. But strip all that external stuff away. The money, the fame, the titles, the possessions, the achievements, and we're all just trying to make it through each day with our dignity intact. We're all just trying to survive and hopefully thrive. We all want fundamentally the same things. We all want to be seen for who we really are, not who someone assumes we must be. We want to be heard when we speak. We want to be respected and valued. We want to matter. We want our existence to count for something. We want to be treated like we're worth something, like our lives have value. The next time you're in a position of authority, any kind of authority, big or small, the next time you're making a judgment about someone based primarily on how they look or how they act or how they present themselves, I want you to ask yourself some honest questions. Really think about this. Am I really seeing this person clearly? Am I seeing them as they actually are? Or as I assume they must be based on stereotypes and prejudices? Am I giving them the benefit of the doubt? Am I treating them the way I would want to be treated if our positions were reversed? If I were in their shoes, in their situation, how would I want to be spoken to? How would I want to be treated? And if the answer to any of those questions is no, if you realize you're not seeing clearly, not being fair, not treating someone the way they deserve to be treated, then stop. Take a breath. Take a step back. Make the phone call to verify. Ask the clarifying question. Check your assumption before acting on it. Give people the basic dignity of being seen for who they actually are, not who you've decided in your mind they must be based on superficial factors. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our stories. Share this video right now with everyone you know, because someday, and this is absolutely guaranteed, someday you might be the one walking into that hospital or that store or that office in comfortable, casual clothes, maybe having a bad day, maybe not looking the part that people expect based on their stereotypes and assumptions, maybe being judged unfairly. And in that moment when you're on the receiving end of that judgment, when you're the one being dismissed or mocked or turned away, you'll desperately hope that someone extends to you the same grace, the same benefit of the doubt, the same basic human respect that you've been extending to others throughout your life. That's the real lesson from my day at Riverside Memorial Hospital. That's what I learned from being turned away from my own hospital by my own staff. Not that people should automatically recognize me because I'm famous. Not that fame or wealth should grant special treatment or privileges. But that everyone, every single person, from the CEO to the janitor, from the doctor to the patient, from the owner to the homeless person, deserves to be treated with basic human respect and dignity. No exceptions, no qualifications, no conditions. It's actually a pretty simple lesson when you break it down. Really simple. But simple doesn't mean easy, and it certainly doesn't mean unimportant. Sometimes the simplest truths are the most profound and the hardest to actually live by consistently, day after day. So the next time, and there will be a next time for all of us, the next time you're about to make an assumption about someone you've just met, pause for just a second. Think about it. The next time you're about to treat someone as less than because they don't meet your expectations or fit your mental picture of how someone important or worthy should look or act, remember this story. Remember what happened to me. Remember that you might be looking at the actual owner of the hospital, or you might be looking at someone who deserves your respect regardless of whether they own anything at all, because their worth as a human being doesn't depend on their bank account or their address or their fame or their possessions. Drop a comment telling us what lesson you learned from this story. Thank you so much for watching till the very end. If this story changed how you think, if it made you reflect on your own assumptions and prejudices, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with everyone who needs to hear it, with everyone who might benefit from this lesson. See you in the next one. God bless you all. And remember, treat everyone you meet today with the respect and dignity they deserve as a fellow human being. Every single person. No exceptions.